Evening, ma'am. Reason for the stop, your left tail light's out. Can I see your license, please?
We always start with that.
Start with what? License and registration, slowly.
You're standing in the same spot, same hand on your belt.
Okay.
You did that last time, too.
Last time? This says this can't be
I
right.
told you I died.
The body cam clicks on at 11:43 p.m. A blue pulse washing over asphalt that still smells like rain. The dispatcher's voice is routine, a broken taillight, a female driver. When the officer steps closer, the woman in the car says his name before he speaks. Her eyes don't blink. Her license returns clean issued 23 years ago to someone pronounced dead in a county morgue 2 miles away. The stop lasts 7 minutes. None of it is supposed to exist. I stay with this story. Not for the shock, but for what it reveals about memory, authority, and the thin procedure lines that separate truth from what we file away and never question again. Evan Mercer's body cam came alive with a soft chirp at 23:43:12, the red indicator blooming like a small wound in the corner of his vision. The patrol car idled on the shoulder of Route 117, engine humming. Low, heater pushing out air that smelled faintly of old coffee and plastic. Rain had stopped 10 minutes earlier, leaving the road slick and black, reflecting. The blue and red wash of his light bar in long, trembling ribbons. Ahead, a sedan sat half a tire over the white line, one taillight stuttering like a tired heartbeat. He didn't rush. Training had turned every traffic stop into a ritual, a sequence you could follow even when your mind wandered. He angled the cruiser's wheels toward the shoulder, set the spotlight just above the rear window, and called it in with a voice that sounded steadier than he felt. County 3 Adam 12. Traffic stop. Route 117 near mile marker 9. Dark sedan. Partial plate. Henry Charles 7. Dispatch crackled back. Board and automatic. Copy. 3 Adam -12. Time 23:43. Stand by. Evan clipped his flashlight to the heel of his hand the way the academy taught. Beam down, not up, not pointed at his own reflection in glass. He checked the rear quarter panel for movement, for silhouettes. Nothing. The cabin was dim, tinted windows clouded with rain residue. He stepped out into cold, damp air, boots touching gravel that popped under his weight, and he felt the quiet of the woods press in on both sides of the road. No houses here. No storefronts, just pine and darkness, and the thin sound of tires passing far away like someone tearing paper. As he approached, he kept his left hand free, hovering near his holster without touching it. Touching it made drivers nervous. Not touching it made him feel exposed. He chose the middle ground, palm open, fingers relaxed, posture that said calm but ready. The sedan's window slid down a few inches before he even spoke. A smooth electric whine cutting through the night. The opening was narrow, like the car itself didn't want to breathe. A woman's voice came out first. Evening, Officer Mercer. He stopped half a step short, not frozen just, paused. The words landed with a familiarity he couldn't place, like hearing your name spoken from another room in a house you thought was empty. His flashlight stayed angled down. He forced his voice into the tone he'd used 1,000 times, the one that never invited conversation to get personal. Evening, ma'am. Reason I'm stopping you is your left taillight is out. Can I see your license, registration, and proof of insurance? The woman didn't fumble. No nervous laugh, no sudden reaching, no oh my God, I didn't know. Just a hand appearing in the slit of window light, pale fingers holding a wallet already open. When she lifted the license toward the gap, the plastic caught his spotlight and flashed back at him. Her face remained mostly hidden, but he saw enough smooth cheek, dark hair tucked behind one ear, eyes that reflect light in a flat way that made them seem deeper than they should have been. Her expression wasn't frightened. It wasn't angry. It was neutral, like she was waiting for him to complete a task she'd watched 100 times. He took the license carefully, pinching the edge like it might crumble. The name printed across it made his stomach tighten. Mara Eldridge. Under it, a date of birth, a local address, and an issue date that did not belong in this world. 2002. Evan's thumb hovered over the hologram seal. The state watermark shimmered properly. The microprint band along the bottom looked right. It wasn't some cheap fake peeled off a printer. It felt worn, real, the corners softened by years of use. But the year slammed against his sense of time like a door. His radio chirped behind him. Dispatch again. 3 Adam 12. Return on Henry Charles 7 comes back to a 2014 gray Ravian, registered to Mara Eldridge, address on file in Bryan County. Valid. No wants, no warrants. Evan stared down at the license. Bryan County, that's where he'd grown up. That's where the old paper mill stood abandoned. where kids used to dare each other to sneak inside. And Mara Eldridge, he knew that name. Not because he'd ever met her, but because it lived like a splinter in the town's collective memory. The kind of tragedy people reference quietly, then looked away. He kept his face steady and looked back toward the window slit. "Miss Eldridge, is this your current address?" A beat of silence, not the normal silence of someone thinking. A silence that felt measured. "Yes," she said. "It's where I've always been." His throat tightened. A procedural line floated up from training, one of those policy phrases instructor repeated until it sounded like prayer. "Maintain control of the stop. Don't let the subject control the pace." Evan exhaled slowly through his nose. "Okay," he said, voice careful. "Do you know your taillight is out?" "No." A pause. "But you knew I would be here." Evan felt a chill creep under the collar of his uniform despite the vest pressed warm against his chest. He kept his eyes on the window, then forced himself to glance at the car's interior. There was no smell of alcohol, no movement suggesting a weapon. The dash was clean, almost too clean. On the passenger seat, a folded cardigan set like someone had placed it there for later. And on the rearview mirror, hanging from a thin string, was a small tag hospital-style yellowed with age. He leaned slightly, trying to catch the print on it. The string swung once gently, like it had been disturbed by a breath. Evan's radio clicked again, his sergeant's voice cutting through, sharper than dispatch. "Mercer, you good? You've been quiet." Evan kept his eyes on the narrow opening of the window, on the woman he still hadn't fully seen. "Yeah," he said, though the word felt like a lie he could taste. I'm running her information now." The woman's eyes lifted, and for the first time, the neutrality cracked. Not into emotion, into recognition, like she'd been waiting for a particular moment. "Don't go back to your car," she said softly. "Not yet." Evan's fingers curled slightly around his flashlight. In the woods behind him, something shifted, just branches settling, maybe, or an animal moving through wet leaves. But the sound was too slow, too deliberate, like someone changing their mind about stepping closer. He swallowed, then spoke the way officers speak when they're trying to keep a situation from turning into a scene. Calm, low, almost kind. "Ma'am, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them." Her hand rose into the slit of light again, palm up, empty. And then she added, so quietly he almost thought it was his own mind, "You pulled me over once before. You just don't remember how it ended." The station doors sealed shut behind Evan with a hydraulic sigh that sounded too final for midnight. Inside, fluorescent lights flattened the world into pale rectangles, bleaching out whatever mystery the night had tried to hold. The smell was disinfectant and burnt coffee, a familiar mix that usually steadied him. Tonight it didn't. Tonight it felt like a place that erased things. Mara Eldridge sat on a metal bench beneath a wall-mounted camera, hands folded. In her lap, posture relaxed in a way that ignored the room entirely. No cuffs. That had been Evan's call. He'd justified it by the book. No probable cause, no threat indicators. But the truth was simpler and harder to admit. He hadn't wanted to touch her. Not yet. "Sit tight," he'd said when they came in. She'd nodded, like someone humoring a formality. Now Evan stood at a terminal near records. His patrol jacket draped over the back of a chair, radio muted. The screen glowed blue against his tired eyes as he typed her name again. Slower this time, deliberate. "Mara Eldridge. Enter." The system didn't hesitate. Deceased, date of death, April 17th, 2002. Location, Bryan County General Hospital. Cause, traumatic blunt force. MVC. Pronounced by Dr. Elhan. Certificate filed, April 19th, 2002. Evan leaned back slightly, chair creaking under his weight. Death certificates didn't come back ambiguous. They weren't rumors. They were signed, sealed, archived. He clicked deeper attachments, scans, handwritten notes digitized into permanence. There it was, the coroner's signature, the hospital stamp, the grainy black and white. Intake photo of a young woman with dark hair matted to her forehead, eyes closed. She looked exactly like the woman sitting 30 feet away under camera 3. "Run it again," his sergeant said quietly from behind him. Evan hadn't heard him approach. Sergeant Cole stood with his arms folded, duty belt heavy with years, eyes fixed on the screen without blinking. He wasn't panicked. That would have been easier. He looked annoyed, like a man whose night had been inconvenienced by something that shouldn't exist. "I did," Evan said. "Twice. I checked county and state." Cole nodded once. "Do it through NCAC." Evan complied. The federal database chimed back with the same verdict, colder somehow for being nationwide. Deceased. 2 decades ago. Case closed long before Evan ever put on a badge. Silence pooled between them, thick and uncomfortable. Cole finally spoke. "Could be identity theft." Evan shook his head. Slow. License is real. Holograms match current issue. Issue date's right there. And dispatch ran the plate. VIN checks out. Cole exhaled through his nose. Then we've got a clerical contamination. Old death record not purged. It happened. It doesn't, Evans said before he could stop himself. He turned, meeting Cole's eyes. Not like this. Not with a coroner's file and hospital record intact. Cole studied him for a moment, then glanced toward the bench where Mara waited. She was looking straight ahead. Not at them, not at the camera. Like she knew exactly where she was without needing to see it. You talked to her? Cole asked. A little. And? Evan hesitated. In his head, academy instructors echoed stick to facts, not feelings, but the facts felt thin. She knew my name before I said anything. Cole's jaw tightened, just slightly. That's not impossible. She also knew Briar County, Evans said, and things she shouldn't. Cole stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mercer, listen to me carefully. You are not paid to solve metaphysical puzzles at midnight. You are paid to document anomalies and pass them up the chain. Evan glanced back at the screen, at the timestamp on the death certificate. 2002, he'd been 14. He remembered the accident now, the way the town had gone quiet for a week. Flowers by the roadside. His father mentioning it once, and then never again. She died in a car crash, Evan said softly. Yes, Cole replied. According to the file. And she's sitting in our station. Cole's radio crackled. Sergeant Cole, Internal Affairs notified. They're looping records and legal. Cole closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. Decision settling in. All right, we do this clean. Interview room B, audio and video. No speculation. No leading questions. Evan nodded, pulse quickening. As he turned toward the interview room, Mara finally looked up. Her eyes met his through the glass, steady, almost gentle. They always start with the file, she said, voice carrying softly through the hallway. That's where they make their first mistake. Evan stopped at the door, hand hovering over the handle, the weight of policy, and something older pressing down on his chest. Interview room B was built to feel neutral. Beige walls, a steel table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs that never quite matched in height. An accident of procurement that subtly shifted power without anyone admitting it. The camera's red light blinked steadily above the door frame, timestamp rolling in the corner of the feed, 0174. Evan noticed it the way divers notice their oxygen gauge, aware it was there. Afraid to look too closely. Mara Eldridge sat with her hands folded, fingertips resting lightly against each other, as if she'd practiced the posture. Not defensive, not relaxed, prepared. The cardigan from the car now hung over the back of her chair, neatly placed. Evan wondered when she'd had time to do that. He took the opposite seat and set a thin folder on the table between them. It was mostly empty printouts of the license scan, the NCIC return. Death certificate he hadn't wanted to touch but had printed anyway. Paper made things feel more real, or more final. This interview is being recorded, Evan said, voice even. Do you understand that? Yes, Mara replied. She didn't look at the camera when she said it. She looked to him. Okay, he said. A pause. He chose his next words carefully, the way instructors taught when a situation was drifting off script. For the record, please state your name. Mara Eldridge, and your date of birth. She hesitated, just long enough to register. January 12th. What year? Her eyes flicked to the folder, then back to him. You already know what the file says. I need you to answer, Evans said. Not harsh. Firm. 1979, she said quietly. Evan wrote it down even though his hand felt unsteady. That would have made her 23 in 2002, the age of the woman in the morgue photo. All right, he continued. Mara, according to state and county records, you were pronounced dead on April 17th, 2002. I need you to explain that. She leaned back slightly, chair legs scraping once against the floor. The sound echoed louder than it should have. I don't remember dying, she said. I remember the impact. Evan kept his pen moving. The car accident. Yes. Her gaze drifted, not unfocused, but inward. A green light that wasn't green yet. A truck that didn't slow. The smell of antifreeze before I felt anything else. That information is in the report, Evan said. She shook her head. Not all of it. She leaned forward now, elbows resting on the table, closing the distance in a way that made Evan resist the urge to lean back. You wrote that I was ejected, she continued softly, but that's not what happened. The door jammed. I was trapped. That's why it took them so long to get me out. Evan's pen stopped. He looked down at the death certificate. Cause of death, traumatic blunt force. Secondary note, prolonged extrication. That detail wasn't public. It wasn't in the paper. It lived in a supplemental report archived in Bryan County's basement and digitized years later. Who told you that? Evan asked. Mara's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. No one. Silence settled again, heavier now, pressing against the glass walls. Evan felt the presence of people beyond them, Cole, records, maybe legal watch from a monitor, waiting for him to either regain control or lose it completely. You said my name during the stop, Evan said. How did you know it? Her eyes softened. Because you told it to me. A long time ago. That's not possible. She studied him, head tilted slightly, like she was deciding how much truth he could carry without breaking. You were with your father. You'd just gotten your learner's permit. He pulled over to help, because he was off duty, but still wore the badge like it mattered. Evan felt heat crawl up his neck. His father had been a deputy. He died 6 years ago. The memory she described, rain, roadside, his father stepping out to check on a wrecked car, it rose unbidden, sharp, and unwelcome. You were there, she continued. You held a flashlight. You kept saying, "Sir, can you hear me?" Even after he told you not to. Evan pushed back from the table, chair legs screeching this time. That's enough. Mara didn't flinch. You don't remember because no one wants to remember what happens after the report is written. Evan stood, palms flat, on the table, grinding himself in cold steel. This interview isn't about my family. No, she said gently. It's about what the system does when something doesn't fit. He stared at her, heart pounding. Training protocols flickered through his mind. Terminate interview if emotional compromise is detected. He should stop. Call Cole. Reset. Instead, he asked, if you're alive, Mara, where have you been for 23 years? Her gaze drifted toward the one-way glass. In places that don't keep records, she said. And in memories no one checks. The camera's red light blinked steadily, capturing everything. Evan realized then that whatever she was, woman mistake or something else entirely, she wasn't improvising. She was remembering, and that terrified him more than the idea of a ghost ever could. Dawn didn't arrive so much as it seeped in. A thin gray light bleeding through the high windows of the station and draining the night of its secrecy. Evan noticed it only because everything else began to change with it. The building woke up. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed with purpose. What had been strange an hour ago was now a problem that needed managing. Internal affairs arrived at 6:12. They didn't announce themselves loudly. No raised voices. No urgency. Just two people in plain clothes. Badges clipped but not displayed, shoes too clean for patrol. One man, one woman, both calm in the way that comes from authority that doesn't need to explain itself. Sergeant Cole met them halfway down the hall. Evan watched from behind the glass of interview room B as Cole spoke in low tones, his body angled protectively toward records. The woman from IA nodded occasionally, pen moving across a small notebook. The man didn't write anything. He just listened. Mara sat across from Evan, hands folded again, expression unchanged. She hadn't spoken since the interview ended. Not when Evan stepped out to brief Cole. Not when the camera was shut off. Not even when an officer brought her a cup of water she didn't touch. They're here, Evan said quietly. I know, she replied. They always come early. Evan frowned. Always? She met his eyes, early enough to shape the language. A knock at the door, sharp and controlled. The woman from IA stepped inside without waiting for an answer. She glanced once at Mara, then at Evan, her gaze clinical. Officer Mercer, she said, we're placing a temporary evidentiary hold on all recordings related to tonight's stop and subsequent interview. She slid a single-page document onto the table. Evan recognized the header immediately, a rarely used classification code tied to public safety exemptions, an ongoing internal review. The kind that froze footage in legal amber. This hold is effective immediately, she continued. Distribution or discussion outside authorized channels will constitute a policy violation. Evan picked up the paper, eyes scanning the language. Words like anomaly, clerical inconsistency, potential database corruption. Not one mention of a person sitting in the room. And her? Evan asked. The man from IA stepped in now, closing the door behind him. Ms. Eldridge will be transferred to County Medical for evaluation. She hasn't broken any laws, Evan said. There's no probable cause to detain her. The man smiled politely. Officer Mercer, when records conflict at this level, we err on the side of public safety. Mara finally spoke. That's what you call it now. The woman from IA didn't react. Miss Eldridge, we'll need you to come with us. Mara stood smoothly, cardigan already over her shoulders. She looked at Evan as if memorizing him, not with fear, but with something like resignation. You see how fast it happened, she said. First the file, then the phrasing, then the disappearance. Evan's jaw tightened. You're not disappearing, she tilted her head. That depends on who's writing the report. 2 hours later, the station returned to routine. Mara was gone. Interview room B was cleaned. The coffee machine was refilled. At 8:03, Evan was formally relieved of duty pending review, his badge and weapon logged temporarily by a lieutenant who wouldn't meet his eyes. Before he left, Evan stopped by records one last time. The terminal still showed Mara Eldridge's file, but something was different. The cause of death field now read, status under review. The date remained. 23 years didn't vanish. They were being negotiated. As Evan stepped outside into full daylight, phone vibrating in his pocket with message, he wasn't allowed to answer. He understood the real weight of the night. Not that the system had failed, but that it was already correcting the narrative. And once the narrative was fixed, the truth wouldn't matter at all. The file closed on a Tuesday. No press conference, no public statement. Just a quiet update pushed through the county intranet at 9:14 a.m. Barry. Between a revised overtime policy and a reminder about bodycam docking procedures, Evan read it on his phone while sitting in his car outside a diner he had gone into, the engine off, the windshield catching a pale winter sun. Broward County announces procedural reforms following an internal data integrity review, database audits, cross-county death verification protocols. Extended retention for evidentiary bodycam footage under anomaly classification. Language that sounded proactive, responsible. Language that never said her name. Evan had been back on duty for 3 weeks by then, cleared of wrongdoing, commended, even, for appropriate escalation under uncertain conditions. The kind of phrase that felt like a pat on the head. Sergeant Cole had shaken his hand, eyes tired, and told him to let it go. She's not your case anymore, Cole had said. She never really was. But Evan knew better. Some cases didn't belong to an officer because of jurisdiction. They belonged because they rewired something permanent. He testified twice in closed sessions, once for internal affairs, once for a county oversight committee that had been reactivated after years of dormancy. He stuck to facts, times, procedures, the precise order of events. He described the stop, the license, the database return. He avoided words like impossible. He avoided saying how it felt when a woman who should not exist spoke his name like a memory. They asked about Mara Eldridge. Where is she now? One council member asked, pen hovering. Evan paused. I was informed she was transferred to county medical for evaluation. And after that, Evan shook his head. I was not given access to that information. Which was true. And not. 2 months earlier, unable to sleep, Evan had driven out to Route 117 just after midnight. The road looked smaller in daylight, less mythic. He parked where the stop had happened and walked the shoulder, boots crunching on gravel. Nothing marked the place. No flowers, no memorial. Just asphalt and trees and the quiet persistence of traffic passing through without noticing. He found the hospital tag lying in the weeds near the ditch. String frayed, plastic brittle with age. The name on it, Mara Eldridge, was faded but legible. He turned it over in his hands for a long time before slipping it into his pocket. He never logged it into evidence. In the months that followed, changes rippled outward in ways only people inside institutions ever notice. Records clerks attended new trainings on legacy data reconciliation. Death certificates older than 20 years were flagged for secondary review when matched against active IDs. A state senator proposed a bill requiring inter-county audits for digital fatalities, citing a recently discovered discrepancy. No one mentioned a woman sitting calmly in interview room B. Evan started teaching a block at the academy, just one afternoon a month, on traffic stops and documentation discipline. He found himself lingering on the importance of timestamps, of not assuming the file told the whole story. Paper isn't truth, he told a room of recruits one day, surprising himself. It's just what we agree to treat as truth until something challenges it. A hand went up. What kind of something? Evan hesitated, then answered honestly. The kind you don't expect. Late one evening, long after the case had been archived under numeric code no one would ever casually search, Evan received an email from an address that didn't look official. No department header, no signature block, just a single line. They corrected the system, that's what they do best. He stared at the screen, heart steady, not racing. He didn't ask how she'd gotten his address, he didn't ask where she was, instead he typed back, "Are you safe?" The reply came hours later. Safe isn't the same as accounted for. That was the last message he ever received from her. Years from now, auditors would point to the reforms as a success. Fewer discrepancies, cleaner databases, better public trust. The system would congratulate itself quietly, the way systems do, and for the most part it would work. Fewer ghosts, fewer loose ends. But sometimes, during a routine stop, Evan would feel it, that brief misfire in his pulse when a driver looked at him a second too long, like they recognized something he couldn't place. He would follow procedure. He always did. He would let the stop end cleanly, uneventfully, the way everyone preferred. Justice, he learned, didn't always feel like resolution. Sometimes it felt like exhaustion. Sometimes it felt like knowing exactly how much had been lost in order to make the world legible again. The file stayed closed. The road stayed open. And somewhere beyond the reach of databases and neatly signed forms, the truth remained unfixed, unfiled, and quietly waiting for the next time someone noticed that a taillight was out.